Hi, I'd like to welcome everybody to my full breakdown of every team in Season 1 of the YouTube Pokémon League. Um, so, what I'll be doing is I'll be reviewing each team based on a set of competitive criteria that I've set beforehand, and I'm going to see how well they're built for the season ahead. And so, here are the metrics, the 10 metrics I'll be using to determine this. So, I'm going to be looking at, does the team have a Fire, Water, Grass core? Is there a Fairy, Dragon, Steel core, which are the two most prominent cores in competitive VGC? And I'm going to be taking a look as, does the team have speed control? Is there fast Pokemon, priority Tailwind, or is there slow Pokemon? Does the team function well in Trick Room? Is there good type diversity? Is there good offensive and defensive variety, type gaps? Defensive chart. Are there good synergies, resistances, immunity stackings of any sorts? Is it good? Does the team have good offensive synergy? Do they have good spread move types, ability to hit most threats, strong overall BS power moves? Anything unique they would have? Obvious synergy, so good weather partners, any terrain teams, pivot combos, etc. Good BST stat total, so taking a look at some of the stats to making sure that they're pretty well sound in terms of being a well-rounded team. Utility and support options, so things like hazard control, do they have the ability to set taunt, thunder wave, things of that nature. And then lastly, we'll take a look at, can the team function in terrain or with weather control? Does it have a Rillaboom or Indeedee, or can it set weather with like a Torkoal and Sun, for example? Cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give each team a rating from 0 to 1 on that, and then afterwards I'm going to add the final score at the end, and I'm going to give the team is going to have a rating from 0 to 1, from 0 to 10, right? So 10 being perfect and 0 being not so good. This is an open-ended draft, so the format of the draft was you can draft whatever you want, and this was Regulation F legal mons, so there are no restrictors. You won't see Calyrex Shadow Rider or Calyrex Ice Rider running around. But you will see, the Paradox Pokemon, as you see a couple of them here. So cool, let's get into it. So for the first team here, this happens to be my team. I'm going to try to be as objective as possible. I'm not going to really apply too much. I'm going to just try to stick to my criteria. So if we take a look at our first criteria, right? Does it have a Fire, Water, Grass core? It does. So it'll get a point for that. Does it have a Fairy, Dragon, Steel core? So I have a Steel type and I have a Fairy type. So I'm going to give it a 0.6. Just because I have a 2/3 of what that should be. And so, historically, competitively in VGC, Fire, Water, Grass cover each other very, very well, almost perfectly. And the same concept for Fairy, Steel, Dragon. I think Fairy, Steel, Dragon has a more flashy a reputation, just because those mons tend to be a lot more cooler. You get them later in games and that type of thing, so you do tend to see them, and they're more quote-unquote powerful, cooler type mons. That's not always the case. And then Dragon's part of that, and Dragons obviously had a huge reputation the first 5 generations of Pokemon. But anyways, to continue with that, does my team have speed control? I have Prankster Tailwind, I have Trick Room, and I have Thunder Wave as well through here. And I have Icy Wind. That's something that I actually forgot to mention in my review when I did my video. I forgot to mention Icy Wind. Fluttermane and Iron Bundle both get Icy Wind. So I actually do think this team has very good forms of speed control. So I'm going to give it a 1 in that sense. That's a plus a point. So good type diversity, offensive and defensive variety. So does my team offer good offensive synergy? Type diversity. I think the team has a good amount of mons. So I have my Fire, Water, Grass. I don't have my Fairy, Steel, Dragon core. Obviously, I don't have a Dragon on the team. I do have a Ghost type, which is great to hit lots of multiple types. I think Fighting types are some of the most important mons in Draft League. So I'm going to give my team probably an 8 out of 10. I think what would have really made this team go a little bit higher would have been having that Dragon type. I think that this team might fall behind a little bit in terms of not having a Dragon type. I know there's a lot of obvious offensive core synergy with Terra. You can always fix that problem, but I'll probably give my team a 0.8 out of that, just for overall purposes of that. In terms of defensive synergy, I think the team sports a lot of mons with a lot of different types of immunities. So, for example, Fluttermane has 3 immunities, Corviknight has 2 immunities, Landorus has 2 immunities. I think in terms of my type chart, it probably looks a little bit rough. I think this team might struggle with fighting types. I think that the team has a sort of an awkward matchup into them. Same thing with Fairy. Funny enough, it's neutral and only resisted by one Pokemon, so I think it might struggle. So I'm probably going to give the defensive type chart probably about a 6 at a 0.6 out of 1, just to be a little more on the safer side with that. And so then next we're going to say offensive coverage. So this team does have really high damage output, and I think that that's pretty clear and obvious by the way that this team is being drafted. You have a lot of Mons that can hit pretty hard. You know, have a Flutter Mane, a Chi-Yu, a Boulder has a really good physical attack. Then Landorus and Iron Hands both have 140 and 145 respectively. So I'm going to give it a 1 for that sense. I think this team gets a whole point for offensive synergy. I think this team is going to be a tough out to deal with defensively. In terms of obvious synergies, I think you have some, Chi-Yu Flutter Mane is probably the one that screams at you the most. Illumise is a Tailwind setter, so it has decent synergy with an Iron Boulder, because Iron Boulder likes to get that Tailwind underneath it and start going. I mean, it's pretty fast mana in and of itself, 124, but teams see it coming and they try to plan around it. I think in terms of Mons that could really benefit from Tailwind, I think the only one that really screams from this team is Landorus. It's 91 is fast, but I think 100 sort of that base of like, okay, this Mon's pretty darn fast before it starts getting into the more ridiculous Mons up here. So I'm probably going to give it also, I would say, obvious synergies. I would probably give it, I think a 0.8 also is pretty fair. The reason I don't give it a 1 is I think this team might struggle sometimes with, like, if you throw, because a good way to think about it is like, if I throw any combination of two Mons together, do you think it would work? I think some of them can start getting a little bit awkward. I know obviously these are all pretty good individual Mons, but like do they complement each other very well? And I think there might be some areas where I feel like the team might not fully meet that criteria. So I'm going to give it a 0.8 for that. In terms of BST stat total, I think the team has pretty good distribution. It's got a really high BST. Its HP is kind of lacking, but again, I think that the bulk is kind of there. I think in this format, probably 90 is where it meets, as to saying, oh, it's pretty good. And given that I have 5 of the 6, I'll probably give it a 0.9 here. I would give it a 1, but I'm going to give it a 0.9. Just because you're missing that extra little 4 here in HP. Probably doesn't matter, given that the bulk on some of these Mons is pretty outlandish. I mean, Porygon 2 is really hard to get rid of, and Corviknight can also be tough to remove. Yeah. In terms of a utility and support Mons, I think this team has a bunch of utility in the sense that it has an Illumise on there. It's got Thunder Wave, like I said, and it had it has tons of taunt. I think I had on here that there was a lot of taunt on this team. So I think, and it has Spore. It's Sporting Spore. So yeah, I might be missing a few. So I'm also gonna give it a 0.8 here. I think Porygon 2 is also a pretty solid utility Mon, because it gets a good ability in Trace, which is a cool, can get disruptive, and same thing with Download and Analytic can be disruptive. So, and then lastly, I'm gonna say terrain and weather control. It has no natural weather setter, and it has no natural terrain setter. However, Iron Bundle gets a lot of terrain. Illumise does get access to the weathers, and Landorus Therian gets access to weather as well. And so for that, I'll probably give it a point. It's probably gonna have to give it a 0.7 in this case, just because I feel like a natural Sunsetter, right? Like I had Torkoal on this team before, would have been really nice, because it would have been sort of a natural like build into having, just instant weather option. Now I have ways of setting it up, obviously. So yeah. So that brings this team over to a total of 8.2, which is cool. So I would say it's pretty good overall for my team. I'm pretty happy with that. Not too sure how the rest of them will stack up. But yeah, at the end I'll recap I'll recap all of the scores that we have, and we'll compare and see who has the quote-unquote best team. So I'm going to pull the next team here, and special values only. So this next team is Trixie Tricos, and the coach is Otto. And so taking a look at this team, we're gonna go back to our criteria, and I'm gonna take a look at the first part. So does this team have a fire, water, grass core? And it indeed does. It has a fire, a grass, and a water type here with Tatsugiri, and it's even got Dondozo, which is pretty good. This team is going to be a very well built Dondozo team. That's going to be exciting to play against. Do we have a fairy? We do. A steel and a dragon, and there is. This team completes, so it gets a point for each of those. And then, does it have good speed control? Usually Dozo teams don't worry too much about speed control. Valiant is here as a good speed control option. Chandelier gets Trick Room. I think the caveat is that it doesn't get fast Trick Room. Or sorry, it's not a slow mon. It can be quite on the faster side, because I think if you take a look at Chandelure, it's base, it's base 80 speed, which can be a little bit tricky to deal with. As you can tell, this team leans more on the slower side, so I think for speed control, this team will get probably about a 0.6, 0.7, you could say, because Iron Valiant gets Icy Wind, and Ogre Pond can be a funny speed control option, because I believe it gets low sweep, or it gets something with utility. I'm not quite sure, but... Oh, and there is a Talonflame on this team, which is instant offense. So in that case, I probably would give it a 0.8. Talonflame is really, really nice. Obviously, because it gets Gale Wings, Tailwind, and the one thing that I will say, I'm not 100% too sure as to how that Talonflame fits on the team. I know you can probably do some funny stuff with Metagross, and usually likes to sit with Earthquake spam teams. I think Team Blue can maybe struggle with that a little bit. I know it's a bulky overall mon, and it is tough to remove, but at base 110 attack in a format with this strong, I think it might be a little bit tricky to get going. I know Glamora's there, and Glamora's a very disruptive wall breaker, or just lead breaker in the beginning. But yeah, so I'll give it that. In terms of type diversity, I think this team has a pretty good overall type diversity. I think for this category, most teams are going to get close to a 1, because, like I said, you could draft whatever you want in this league, so... yeah, I'm going to give it a 1 for that. In terms of defensive chart, this team sports a lot of good immunities. So if you take a look here, this Chandelure is immune to 3 things. Gardevoir is obviously immune to dragon types. And yeah, so there's a couple potential good immunities here that are going to be really, really handy for him, for this player to use. And I think overall there's a really good mix of offensive and defensive types, and you nailed down that Fire, Water, Grass, and Fairy Steel Dragon Core, so it would also going to get a 1 here. In terms of for the defensive chart, I think the defensive chart is really, really nice for this mon. Ting Lu is immune to psychic types, and that's going to be a good one. I think Psy Spam can be tricky in Draft League, and I don't think this team's going to struggle with that. It's got the Fire, Water, Grass Core, and that's just to hammer that home. I think it's really great. I will say the fire type isn't probably the most bulkiest, but it's very, very useful, and it gets a lot of good utility, and taunt, Will-O-Wisp, Tailwind, and it can go for any of the fire and flying stab options. Iron Valiant's a Swiss Army knife. I love this mon. It's such a good draft league mon. It gets kind of whatever you need to use. So for this category, I'm also going to give it a 1. In terms of that's for defensive, synergy, and I don't see too much here, in terms of what it can hold it back. I think of these, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, in that case, I'll give it a 9. I know this is a hard one. It's more of an arbitrary one, but yeah, I'll give it a 0.9, just because, just for that. You maybe would want this to be cleaner, but the team. In terms of offensive synergy, offensive coverage, I think this team can get a lot of single type coverage. I think this team's going to struggle to hit spread moves a lot. So I think the at point of attack, this team might be susceptible to protect teams, because there's no way to deal damage consistently with spread moves. So I think this team might struggle a little bit offensively, in terms of dealing consistent damage, I will say. I think there's a good amount of physical damagers, and then I think special attackers are also can be good. So we take a look at their special attackers. You have Chandelure, Glamora. The fact that there's only those two, though, I know Valiant and Tatsugiri are at base 120, but in a format like this, I think these Mons might struggle a little bit. The physical attackers are very good. Metagross and Valiant, obviously you have the Dondozo that gets a +2 attack, but I think for offensive coverage, this team might struggle to do a little bit of damage. It's got the obvious Pows and Glamora with the Meteor Beam sets, and can do damage if it's stab, but I think outside of stab, the team might struggle a tiny bit to get damage output off, so this will be a point. I'm going to give it a 0.5. It feels a little low, but I think this team has a lot of other really good things going for it right now. In terms of obvious synergies, I mean, Dozogiri is probably the one that jumps off the page. And then outside of that, there's not maybe too much else that you would say, oh, cool, look at that. That looks like a great combo. Do the Mons stand next to each other well? Like, can you throw Iron Valiant and Tinglu together? I don't know. It depends on the set that you're running, but I'm not sure that there's too much obvious of that, and for that, it'll probably also get a 0.5. In terms of BST total, I think 535 is pretty solid. I think we said like we want 90s above everything. And this is for special defenses on the very low side. So I think, unfortunately, because it has these two, it's probably going to get somewhere of a 0.6 nature, I think is where you're going to have to sort of give it. Just because I think that the BST is going to be kind of awkward for this team. Sounds bulky, but there's a lot of very light Mons on this team that don't like to take too many hits. So this team might kind of find itself in an awkward position sometimes in terms of fighting some of those higher BST teams with higher BST Mons. In terms of utility and support, this team's got a lot of it. It's got, obviously, you see there's a lot of taunt there, but this Iron Valiant can do whatever, everything and anything that you want it to do. Squad Guard, Trick Room, Taunt. So I get A+ for that guy. And then Talonflame also has a pretty good set of utility. I think the rest of the Mons can do their own funny things. I think Chandelure obviously is the Trick Room, is usually a Trick Room user. It gets imprisoned Trick Room, which is really nice. But I think I'm also going to give it a 0.6 for that. I just think that the team could use something maybe a little more different. But I again, in terms of team structure, I'm not saying that it should, but I'm saying team structure probably doesn't allow for it. But I'll change my mind. I'll give it a 0.7 just because I really like the Iron Valiant and the Talonflame do give you a lot of flexibility with what they can do. And then for the last part, which is terrain and weather control. Now, if I'm correct, this team does get a lot of rain dance, a lot of sunny day. It doesn't have a Mon that you throw out there and it immediately sets the sun. It doesn't have a Mon that you throw out there and it sets the rain, or the rain, obviously. So there's no drizzle, Also terrain, right? There's no good sense of terrain on this team. But there is Mons that can obviously set it. I'm gonna probably give this team probably a 0.5 on that. I think the team has ways of setting it up. I probably would give it a 0.4, to be honest with you. It has ways of setting it up, but is it a primary thing? No. So probably wasn't at the forefront of the draft for Auto. So for this player, so I'm gonna go ahead and give this team in overall that adds up to an 8.4. So pretty good so far. That's just 0.2 better than the first team, which was my team. So very, very good. Cool. So we'll take a look at the next team. And so let's change this to Makalola. Cool. So this is a cool team. So this coach is the Las Vegas Corviknights, coached by Ant-Man. Good friend. Taking a look at our first criteria here, right? So we'll take a look. Does this team have Fire, Water, Grass core? So it's got a good fire type. Oh, he chose the VGC, Mr. VGC himself. It's got a good water type, and it's got a good grass type. Oh, look at that. So he got Incineroar, Whimsicott, Urshifu, Raptor. That's pretty funny. That's a pretty big staple here. Pretty big staples in VGC. So you get a 1 for that. Do you have a good Fairy Steel Dragon core? So you have the Dragonpult, you have the Hatterene, and you have an Iron Tread. So there you go. And you have a Walking Wake, which is cool. It's got a good it's got a dual type, which is always a typing of water and dragon, which is always a big bonus. In terms of speed control, you have a Whimsicott, which is, one of the best Trick Room setters. I'm sorry, Tailwind setters in the game. Because Prankster Tailwind is always, fantastic. And then it also gets Taunt. It gets Trick Room. Hatterene is also a Trick Room mon. Cressalion's a Trick Room mon. So I think this team does have the speed control aspect nailed down pretty well. Cressalia's a really reliable Trick Room center. In terms of type diversity, so this team has two Psychic types that maybe want to play similarly. They're both sort of special attacking tanks. Hatterene doesn't need to set up. Cressalia does in order to do damage. There is a double up with Incineroar and Volcarona in terms of fire types, and then there's a double up of water here. So I think in terms of type diversity, this team might struggle. I know you look at the chart and you see, type defensively wise, it doesn't struggle too much, right, defending things. But in terms of just overall diversity, I think sometimes this team might struggle a little bit to get pinned versus specific type matchups, because it might struggle just due to the lack of type diversity. For example, it might struggle to do damage versus, I don't know, maybe a ghost type. It only has a Dragapult, but there is an Incineroar, so for whatever reason this team might struggle to do well in those cases. So I'm gonna give it a 0.6 in that case, just because I think that's what it was. There's no rock type on this team. Okay, I'm sorry. So because there's no rock type, and then but that's more of an example, not to get too ahead of myself, because I'm struggling to come up with an example for that one. And then in terms of defensive type chart, I think this team does pretty decently well. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4 in the red, and then 1 neutrality, which is rock. And rock's one of those funny types to defend against, but I think this team has more than enough tools to do that. And so in terms of that, I think I'm gonna also give this team. I'm just struggling with the double ups and types, and I think that looking at them on a sheet here, it looks great, but I think once you're prepping against this team, it might have a tricky time with defensive synergy. So I'm gonna give it a 0.7 for now. And then in terms of offensive coverage, it's got really good point of attack mons. It's got the Urshifu. It's got the Walking Wake, which can be pretty interesting. Treads is also an interesting type. It's got that. It's got the really nice stab options. It's a pretty optimal type. Hatterene, same thing. I think the team might struggle again, sort of similar to the last team. It doesn't have a lot of spread coverage, which might struggle to remove mons quickly in a lot of senses, or I should say might struggle with protects. It has the Urshifu, right? This team has the Urshifu, which you can bypass as protect. But outside of that, I think the team might struggle a little bit offensively, just pressuring a little bit of damage at times. But overall, that's not to say the team is bad offensively. I still give this team a 0.8 out of 10. Again, just because we would have liked to see a little more type diversity there. Obvious synergies. So Incineroar, you can throw it next to anybody, and its best friend, right? It's got ultimate support. Whimsicott, same thing, ultimate support. That Whimsicott Urshifu Rapid Strike is going to be a nightmare to deal with, because you just go for Tailwind and just start exerting tons of pressure with the Urshifu. Dragapult also, and yeah, I think this team nails down that aspect of it. Volcarona, I think Volcarona is kind of awkward on this team. Volcarona is a team that likes to support a lot of setup. This team doesn't like to set up too much. So I think it can feel a little bit awkward in that sense. So I think in terms of obvious synergies, I'll probably give this team maybe a 0.7. I think this team could have done a little bit better in that department to get a little bit more going there. Overall BST, this team is all over got all over 90s again, which is pretty good. I do think that there's a lot of mons on here that are good pieces, but given the power level in this draft, I think this team also might struggle a little bit with that overall BST. So I'm gonna give it a 0.5 in that sense, because these all mons are pretty solid mons individually, but given some of the really broken mons in this format, there's the Urshifu Rapid Strike is one of those really strong mons in this format. But I think outside of that, I think there might be a little bit of a struggle in terms of output. In terms of utility and support options, Um, I think that you have the Incineroar, which is really really nice, and you have the Whimsicott. Um, I know you don't really ever need too much more, so I'll probably give this team a good 8 out of 10. I think there's a lot of really cool, parting shot and encore disabled. I mean encore stuff with Whimsicott and Hatterene has magic balance, which is cool. It's good anti like spore stuff. Um, and then I think I'll give it a point 0.8 for that. In terms of terrain and weather control, I think so. So this team has again also is a team that doesn't have anything obvious. It gets Prankster Sunny Day, which is nice. It doesn't have a fast rain setter, and there's no obvious terrain setter on this team. I think this team would have really liked to have maybe like a psychic terrain for Hatterene to have it go off a little bit easier, to exert a little more offensive pressure. Or have maybe a rain for Urshifu. So I think this team could have probably nailed that aspect a little bit better. But other than that, I think I would still give it a. I'll give it a. For that point, for that terrain weather control, I'm probably going to give it a 0.6. So that gives it an overall score of a 7.7, which is still really good. This team really likes all the really fun VGC mods that it gets. Really relevant VGC tool. So I'm really excited to see how this team goes. Okay, cool. So we're going to continue here with our next team, and this team is the Garchomp's Goliaths. So CPT Aro, I would say Captain Aro. I guess that's what he's going for. But I don't know. But yeah, so we'll take a look at our first criteria, right? So does the team have a clear fire, water, grass core? And it's got Azumarill, Linoones, and Arcanine. Perfect. The first three. That's cool. That's a really cool first three. I'm personally a big fan of Azumarill. I think it's a very sneaky good Pokemon. It's physical Primarina basically, but I think in some ways it can be much more useful because you can it has a little more staying power than the Primarina in a lot of cases. So it can be a pretty sneaky good pick with huge power. And for obvious reasons, we know what Linoones and Arcanine do. They're just overall good general defensive Pokemon. So you get a 1 for that right there. And then so for your Fairy Steel Dragon Core, there's a Grimmsnarl and Goodra Hisui. And that covers your core. That's a pretty efficient way to cover that core. Having the steel and dragon, stacked up together, and so that's also a 1 right there. You get an extra pull point for that. In terms of a speed control here, so there is no obvious Prankster Tailwind. In fact, I'm not sure. Let's type in Tailwind here. Let's just see if this team gets Tailwind. So there is one Tailwind. There's a Moltres Galar. Does this team get Trick Room? I believe the Word Eater gets it, yeah. And then, so this team also has the fastest Pokemon in the game in terms of overall base speed, and that would be Regieleki. So I will say, while it's nice to have the fastest Pokemon and have, I guess it's sort of medium speed Tailwind. Moltres Galar isn't the slowest Pokemon. I believe Moltres Galar is a 90, so it's not slow, but it's also not the fastest thing to set Tailwind. Usually Tailwind setters are pretty fast, and Weirdeer is a solid option for Trick Room. It's a new evolution that was introduced, and I think it's a pretty decent Trick Room setter, giving it has Intimidate. It's hard to remove in one shot. But I think I'm going to overall give the team probably a 0.6. I think the team could have done a little bit better in terms of trying to prioritize Trick Room. I guess it has Prankster Tailwind. Also, I'm sorry, Prankster Thunder Wave. All right, I'll give it the 0.7 because the utility, I like that. It could be disruptive. So, in terms of type diversity, so it's got the fire. It's very efficient with its types. Funny enough, there's a lot of double types on this team. It has a lot of really multitude of things that it can hit. There's not too much of a double up, which is really nice. I appreciate that a lot. So yeah, you know what? In fact, I don't even know if there is a double up on. Oh, there's double dark on this team. But yeah, I'm gonna give this team I'll give them a 0.9. The reason why is because there's one double up in dark. Just it's just minus a point, fraction of a point. In terms of defensive chart, I mean, you look at the type synergy here, it's A plus. I mean, I guess because A plus would be all green here, but I mean, it's really good. It's just one susceptible to ground, which is, again, a very common thing you see in a lot of draft league teams, and that's why ground types are so heavily coveted. Um, and so I think that the team might struggle overall against a good ground type attacker. Obviously, there's ways around that. I mean, it's got a levitate mon, and you can always tear out of it, and Arcanine does well into it. But the fact that ground does good into 3 of 4 of the really good mons on the team, I think the defensive chart might get kind of funny there. But outside of that, I'll give it a 0.7. Offensive coverage, I think it's got great offensive coverage. It's got its foundational cores here. And then it throws in, has enough mix. Ghost is a really good offensive type. Regieleki can be sneaky because it has Transistor. So it can exert some pretty sneaky damage. I know a lot of people thought this thing was going to be really, really good once we got to this Terra format. It hasn't been the case, but in Draft League, it can still become a pretty oppressive hitter if you don't respect it enough. And just E-Web spam is just really, really nice. So, yeah, in terms of offensive synergy, I'll give it a 0.8. I think what is stopping me from giving it a 1 is a presence of a ground type is really, really important. So ground spam, I think, is probably one of the more important formats, like I've said multiple times. And I think this team doesn't have that. So I think that the team might struggle sometimes to just come out and just do damage. And again, I think there's that concept of it just doesn't do enough damage, I think, sometimes. So, in terms of spread moves, sorry, losing my train of thought. But it does have very good change of pace and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of just immediate offensive out of the box start attacking, I don't think this team has a lot of that. It might struggle to do some damage. So I'm going to give it the 0.8 just because it has a good type diversity offensively. But that's been pretty generous for it. So in terms of some obvious synergies, Among Us again goes with just about anything. It's just they can sit there. It's a redirection mon, and they can kind of sit there and just start going. Grimmsnarl is also the same case. It's your prankster mon, and it's got a 120 attack. It's got a sneaky attacking pull. Yeah. So I think that it can be pretty good. Again, similar to previous teams that I mentioned, I think this team has really, really good cores. And so I think that it's going to do really, really well with there. I think that we might also just miss slightly a little bit on the immediate pop. It's got 145 with Spectre, but kind of anything around that 120 range is considered to be good. Anything like really, really good is usually kind of over 130, and usually the 140s are like, wow, that's really strong. So not saying these aren't really strong Pokemon, but I think it might lack that initial pow, and I know this player does like their Gudra Hisui, so it's funny enough that I see it here. But yeah, so obvious synergies are going to be. I'll give it a point for that. I think this team has a lot of good synergies that it can do overall. In terms of the BST total, if you see here, 95, 95, 95. So you have 3 stats under 90. I think in this format, I think 90 is going to be your overall rating, and that's not to say, like, I know some of them are like 50, and Among Us is slow, so you can't knock it for not being fast, because if you sort by speed, the whole distribution, well, yeah, I mean it's okay. These are a lot of middle speed tier mons here. I mean, I don't know if this team benefits too much from Tailwind, so I'm not sure. That's probably why speed control wasn't the biggest thing at the forefront, but if I had to give it a BST total, I'm probably going to give it a 7. I would probably even give it a 6 in some cases. I think these mons are obviously bulky in a lot of these mons cases. But yeah, I'm going to give it a 0.6 for that. In terms of utility and support options, I mean, there's a Grimmsnarl on this team. This team's got utility and support. I mean, Prankster Prankster Thunderwave, both screens, Spectre can be kind of disruptive with Will-O-Wisp. Watch out! Don't leave it alone. Among Us, right? I mean, we can't talk about support without talking about Among Us. This thing's got utility and support for days, and Word Ears was also very good. So, yeah, there's a multitude of support options, which is good. I think the team has nailed that aspect down pretty well. So I'm gonna give it a 0.9. Only No, you know what? I think this team's a 1. I think this team really went all in on support, and that's really good. So, terrain and weather control. There's absent weather, absent rain. I'm sorry, absent terrain. It does get sunny day. It does get rain dance. Um, let's look at the terrain. So, I'm not sure. Grassy terrain. So Amoongus gets it, which is funny. And we'll go for misty terrain. Sorry, not misty explosion. Misty terrain. Misty terrain. So I think Grimmsnarl. Yeah, I was gonna say Grimmsnarl. So it has access ways to start it, but I'm gonna give it a 0.5. I just don't think it was the emphasis for this team. I think that honestly, I'd probably give it a 0.4. I just don't think that this team really wants to cares to play in that format. And so yeah, so that gives this team's overall rating an 8.1, which is not bad, not bad. So we'll take a look at our next team. Let's copy this here to here. Okay, great. So now let's just and then Persian Lola. Okay, great. So this team is the Supernova Jirachi. This is coached by Kevs. Kev sucks, by the way. That's just usually what this how the saying goes. And usually, you know, if you know, you know, Kev sucks. I'm not sure I mentioned, but Kev sucks. But yeah, anyways. So this team has a solid presence altogether. So let's go through our Fire, Water, Grass core. So we have Rotom Heat, Basket Legion, and it does not have a grass type. Okay, so that's minus a fraction of a point. So we're gonna go 0.6 there because you're missing a third of that core. So we'll go 0.6. And then do they have a Fairy Steel Dragon core? And there is. There's a Clefable, Garchomp, and Gholdengo. Okay, see, so now he picked up the Garchomp, which is tricky. Good. Garchomp's a really popular ground type. Offensive ground type, and it's a good dragon also. So in terms of speed control, Prankster, Tailwind, and Trick Room, I think this team really nailed down both and prioritized it and got a really solid Trick Room user setter and a really good solid Tailwind support user with Prankster, Tailwind, and Murkrow, which is really nice. The Basket Legion is really fast also. You can set the range from this team, can go real fast. And then the Trick Room mode on this team can be tricky because Red Period also is a really fantastic Trick Room sweeper. Original, I believe, does get access to Icy Wind. If we take a look here, yeah, a lot of these ones get access to Tailwind actually. So yeah, Original is gonna be great for that. So yeah, overall, I'll give this team a 1. I'll give it an extra point for speed control. Type diversity. It's kind of funny looking at this. The type diversities. There's not too much type overlap. It's dark again, so I think again most teams are pretty well. So then there's a ghost overlap, so that's always kind of tricky to deal with because it makes you weak to specific types. And they do share weaknesses, as they're both ghost types, so they show both weak to dark and ghost. So because their secondary types don't cover them for that. So I know there's a Clefable there for redirection and things of that nature, but yeah, I'll give them a 7. I'll give him a 0.7 for that. And then in terms of type diversity, yeah, I think that this team does offer enough in terms of type diversity. I know it doesn't have, again, like that grass type. I think grass types are always, it's funny because they're always like, yeah, they're weak to a lot of things, but they're really useful. So not having one, I think, is a bit of a knock on that. So I still like the type diversity. I'm going to give it a 0.8, just for the lack of not having that core fulfilled. In terms of defensive chart, the defensive chart looks fine. I mean, I don't see too much. This team this team only has 2 glaring weaknesses, right? And 2 bad matchups, which is water and fairy, and then it's just got 3 neutral matchups. So I think overall this team's great. I think sort of the same knock as the last team. I think that it's gonna struggle versus offensive ground type mons. Funny enough, because it's got one of the best offensive ground type mons in the format. Yeah, that could be the only problematic thing. I know it's got 2 immunities. It's got the Rotom Heat for that. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and give it a 0.7. In terms of offensive coverage, this team's got a lot of firepower. Big fan of the firepower. It's got a lot of immediate pressure. It's got decent coverage. It's got the steel, the fast ground, fast water, and I think that those can hit most things pretty hard. Golden Gold's gonna be fun. There's a good amount of spread moves, good amount of single damage. So yeah, I'll give it a point for that. I'm a big fan of the damage output that this team can exert. In terms of obvious synergies, I think this team really nails down a good amount of offensive synergies. This team's got that Sylveon. People really love that Sylveon. But Tailwind, Golden Gold, Tailwind, Sylveon, Tailwind, Garchomp. I mean, Murkrow's going to be the engine that makes this team go. I think it was drafted overall second, so or it might have been the first pick. I'm not quite sure, but yeah, that thing's going to be really pivotal to how this team works in the Prankster Rain Dance. So yeah, it's gonna be a fun time. This team will be fun. There's a lot of obvious, really good type synergy. So I'll give it a 1 there as well. In terms of base stat total, I think that this team's under 90, and that's sort of was when I first look at this team. I'm like, oh, this team doesn't look. It has obvious, really strong mons, right? So going back to that point of, it's got good attackers, it's got good special attackers, but it's got one that's got a really high special attack stat. Sylveon's just got spammable hyper voice, so I think it would be really. It could be good, but I think again overall, you would want a few more, really strong mons in this format. I think the overall BST could be pretty low. I mean, you see that there's only one. So there's only one stat over 90. And again, given the strength of this format, this team might struggle to take hits. It's going to be good at giving them, but taking them, it's going to be a little critical in this format, given that there's a lot of really strong Pokemon in this format that can just, hit really hard. So yeah, overall I'm going to give it a 0.5 for that. And then in terms of utility and support, I think Murkrow has a lot of support tools. Persian has a lot of support tools. Rotom's got a good support tool set. Clefable as well. So I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna give it a 0.8 for that. And then in terms of terrain weather control, it's got Murkrow, which is their source of weather, and it's got. I guess that's kind of it. I mean, for terrain, let's see, it doesn't really get terrain. So, yeah, I mean, I'll give it the 5. I guess that it wants the 0.5. No, I think it's a little better than that in terms of terrain weather control. Yeah, you know what? I mean, I know this team didn't prioritize it. And you know what? Just going back to the whole BST thing, I think that's really off-putting that it's there. So I'm gonna probably have to give it the 0.2. Yeah, the 0.2 I think is where I'm gonna have to give it. So that gives it to an overall 8.3. I think is where the team goes, which is really good actually for a team that I think was very well drafted. I just again I'm worried about fighting some of these higher BST mons, how it's going to do defensively. I think it's gonna be able to dish out fast, quick damage, but defensively it's like, can you get past those first couple of turns if the other team has a good way of counteracting that, their own Prankster Tailwind or their own really bulky mon that can exert offensive pressure, how's it going to do? So yeah, that's where I land on that team. So let's take a look at our next team. Okay, so let's continue to our next team. So this team is, let me give me 1 second, pull up this team here. So this team is the Cambridge Camerups, coached by Squirrely VGC. And so if we take a look at our first criteria, so we're going to take a look at the Fire, Water, Grass core. So it has a Fire type in Iron Moth. It's got a Water type in Pelipper, and it's got a Grass type in Ogerpon. So check. The team gets 1 point for that. And let's just pull up one thing here, right? And then we're going to say that for the Fairy Dragon Steel core, it has, so it's cool. It's got the Archuleta and it's got the Dragon and Steel core. And then for this Fairy type, it has an Amorous, very cool pick. An Amorous, I won a championship with an Amorous before. It's a really cool mon. I think it's sort of a weirdly used mon, which is funny enough. I'm not sure why. I mean, I guess maybe players shy away from it because I think it can be more on the frail side physically. Yeah, it's base 70 and 80 defense respectively, and then with 74 HP. But this thing is definition of a glass cannon. It can go hard and fast. Good move, pull diversity. So, good fiery dragon steel core. And then if we take a look at the next one, which is speed control. This team has okay ways of doing it. Oh, I see. That's right. This is the team that sniped me with the Meowstick. I I think Meowstick's really good on hyper offensive teams. I think it's a mon that because it gets moves access to Thunder Wave, obviously Fake Out. It gets Trick Room, and then it gets access to, I believe, Sunny Day. Yeah, Sunny Day, and I don't know if it gets access to Rain Dance and Rain Dance as well. And it gets access to Fake Tears and a move that people don't use see very often is Tickle. So it can pair really, really nicely with something like an Enamorous or Fake Tears to start wheeling down for its special attackers. As this team does have a good amount of those. But I would say overall for speed support, I think this team might struggle a little bit. It's got Tailwind users. It's got 2 of them. And it's got a Trick Room user, but I think this team's doesn't have too many great options. It's got the Swift Swim Basculegion female, which is a special attacking variant, but doesn't hit as hard as the regular one because Wave Crash combined with Stab Water can hit hard. And I believe Basculegion doesn't get anything that's that spammable, but I know this player is very comfortable with Rain from what I've gathered. So it'll be interesting to see. But again, overall in terms of speed control, I'm going to probably give this team a 0.6. I just don't think that this team is going to have too much to offer in terms of that. In terms of type diversity, it's pretty cool. It's got a lot of interesting types. It's got its ice and obviously the 2 cores. It's got ground, fast ground, which is always good. Landorus hits very, very hard. And it's got the Urshifu single strike sitting there at the end. And yeah, I think for type diversity, it's this team's got it. I think the thing that I maybe have a little bit of qualm with is just that there's a double up with in terms of fighting of the flying coverage, and there's double with water type coverage. I'm not sure too well how that's going to take into account for this player's matchups, but I can see them sort of maybe struggling. There's not a strong there's not a strong presence of a water type. The water types are there, and they're obviously they're pretty solid, but I think that the team can maybe struggle a little bit there, but yeah, I think overall I'll probably give them 0.7 for that type diversity. Defensive chart. So this defensive chart's not bad. I think it's got the Archaludon, which can become very, very bulky and difficult to remove. It's got a lot of defensive interesting synergies. It's got mons with a couple of immunities, and most of them don't have more than 2. Some of the other teams were sporting mons that have multiple mons with 2 immunities. Again, not the most important thing in the world, but it is nice to have. And I think defensively, I think the team's pretty sound. I think being weak to Ghost can be a little bit tricky in Draft League because Terra Ghost, Terra Blast can be a bit spammable. The Urshifu Seagull helps a lot with that. Their matchup as well, but I think there I'll probably end up giving it a 0.7 also. I think is pretty fair in terms of a defensive chart. I think this team wants to go fast, and that's why it leads to our next part, which is offensive coverage. It's got a lot of tools offensively. I mean, the Urshifu single strike is just such a oppressive hitter with Wicked Blow. Sheer Force is really, really strong. Landorus Strict Force with power. I mean, there's not a lot that can take hits like that easily, especially coupled with the Fake Tears. I mean, it can probably one-shot most things. Archaludon with the Rain, obviously Electric Shot gets going up. Enamorous has really, really good nice synergy with Meowstick with some Tickle strats. You can also probably do, with Tickle strats. And then Basculegion female is really, really fast. So it can offer really good, as long as if the other team's weak to water type moves, it can be pretty strong. And Beartick's probably the one of the more underrated mons on this team. It's a mon that really finds itself on water type moves for obvious reasons. It's got base 130 attack, so it's next to Urshifu. I mean, it's got the same attack as Urshifu. That's why it's on the team. And its speed is 50, but it does have Swift Sim, so it's essentially base 100 speedster type mon. So yeah, in terms of offensive synergy, I'm gonna give this team, and looking at its attack, you take a look at the attack and special attackers. It's got a lot of them. So yeah, this team nailed it. We'll give it a point for that. And then obvious synergies, Rain, right? So Rain's the obvious synergy here. Archuludon, Pelipper, those are the first two, just like bam, right? So this team supports Rain. Meowstic's really good with that. Iron Moth is probably going to have an interesting time. I think it gets access to Hurricane. I'm not 100% on that. Let's just double check. Let's pull it up here. I'm just out of curiosity. So let's go Iron Moth, and then it does get access to Hurricane, right? So yeah, so Iron Moth can function on Rain teams, but I think for Fire Stab, it's probably going to obviously struggle with that with all the Rain. So I'm going to say overall for obvious synergies, I'll give it its 9. I just think that there's going to be a little bit of awkwardness with the Rain and some of the interactions with the types, but a lot of very, very good synergy with this. In terms of BST stat totals, if we take a look here at the chart, so it's got 1, 2, 3 stats over 90. Again, not the most important thing, but you do kind of want to be close at 90. It's very especially defensively not bulky, which can be tricky, because if you take a look at it, Archuludon and Urshifu, I mean, those are two mons that traditionally don't have very high special defense. I think they're both in the 60s. Yeah, they are. So this team might struggle a little bit against really strong special attackers. Even though it has 4 of them of itself, right? But I mean, for Pelipper, you can kind of put in that category. I guess it's got a strong Hurricane. But yeah, I'm gonna probably give this team for the BST. Probably gonna have to give it a 0.5. I mean, it's only got 3 of the stats over, so yeah, in that case, it'll get a 0.5. And then we'll say utility and support options. Meowstic is, I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm just a little biased. I just think this thing gives you so much utility on a team that wants to go really aggressive. So I think that's a lot. The Follow Me with Ogerpon, I haven't talked about too much, but Follow Me Ogerpon is just fantastic. Ogerpon gets a lot of different moves that you can use. I mean, Taunt, Follow Me, Spiky Shield, and it also can hit you really hard offensively as well, and with Sturdy, and yeah, I think this team's got a good amount. I'm going to give it an 8 only because I think outside of Meowstic, there's not too much else support on this team. This team really wants to go fast, and it's got a lot of mons that need probably a little bit more support than what Meowstic can just purely offer. So yeah, I'm going to give it an 8 on that one. And then in terms of terrain and weather control, I think Rillaboom. I think not having access to terrain isn't going to be the worst thing in the world. This thing's obviously a Rain team, so it goes. So I'll give it the 0.9 for that. I think it's pretty fair not having terrain. I'm not going to knock it too much for not having terrain. Just a fraction of a point. And so that brings our total to let's call it, what is this coming here? So this brings it up to 8.2, which is good. Cambridge Camerups. So Cambridge Camerups is going to be an 8.2 overall, which is very, very good. And so for our next one, so this next team is Villa Blanca Belly Gods. Very good. So this team is coached by Mario FG12. I played with Mario a couple seasons. He's a cool guy. Good player. And so if we take a look at the first of our criteria, does this team have a Fire, Water, Grass core? It's got a Ninetales, Polytoad, and Serena. Check. Get a whole point for that one. That's easy. Does it have a Fairy, Dragon, Steel core? So it's got King Gambit, King Raider. If you know, you know. If you really want to know the reference, you can ask me, and I will let you know. I'm going to tell you anyways. Raiders perennially suck, so we just say go Raiders because it's funny to go for the team that's just always really bad. And King Gambit looks like he goes to Raider games. He looks like a Raider fan. Just Google Raider fan, and you're probably like, oh look, it's a King Gambit. So anyways, Fairy, Dragon, Steel core. Yeah, it's there. I love Screamtail. Fun fact, Screamtail is the first Pokemon that I day 2'd with, so I got a very, very special place in my VGC lore. I love that thing. And yeah, Encore Disable, watch out. Don't get caught sleeping. That thing is very, very, very good. So for speed control, so yeah, I don't know if I said that, but Fairy, Dragon, Steel core, you get a 1 on that one. For speed control, this team does not have any Prankster Tailwind. It's got Salamence. It's got Forms of Trick Room. which is good. I don't think this team really prioritized it too much on purpose or not on purpose. I don't know, but I guess I should say it doesn't have too much of it. So I'm gonna go ahead and give it a 0.6 for that. In terms of type diversity, there's an overlap here with the fighting types. And I think there's an overlap with the psychic types. So there's a bit of type overlap, which can get tricky, and flying types. I don't know if it's going to be too detrimental, as a lot of them are weak to different things, but doubling up on a lot of those types of offensive and defensive effectiveness can probably hurt. So I'm going to give it a 0.7 for that. And so we'll go for defensive synergy now next. So it's going to be weak to 3 things, and then it's going to be neutral into 3 other things, which is... It's okay. I think it can. This team might struggle to take hits. It's a good switching team. I will say that. It's a very balanced style team, but I think the team might struggle a little bit given that there's a lot of type overlap given on week to weeks. This team's got to be very careful with the way they play. So I'm going to give them a 0.7. And then offensive coverage. I'm a big fan of King Gambit. I think Gambit's got a really good sword dance set. Great Tusk is awesome. I just wish it was paired with a Tailwind Prankstermon. Thunderous Therian also can be very interesting in certain circumstances. It can wall pretty funny mons, pretty funny things because it's got Volt Absorb and it's got good offensive stab. Base 145 is good, but. Yeah, just I think for offensive synergy, we take a look here. It's only got 2 mons over at 100, and then for attack, it's got a lot of good physical attackers. But I think the imbalance is going to cause me to give this team maybe a 0.6 or a point. I'll give it a 0.7 just because the physical attackers can physically attack like pretty solidly, and you have the Guts Ariyama, which can be interesting, but. I think the lack of special attackers might come to bite this player a little bit later on. In terms of obvious synergies, so what are obvious cores that the team has? It's got the Politoed on there for the rain mode. So the rain Thunderous can be pretty fun to use. Outside of that, I think it's got the Ninetales Great Tusk, which is cool. So that it's got sort of contrasting, clashing weather. And the Screamtail also likes to play in the rain. Play in the sun. So I think that there's decent synergies there. So I'll give it a 0.8. Whether they'll be as effective or not, I'm not sure. But yeah, I think for BST totals, if we take a look, so it's got half the stats are under. So I'm gonna have to give it a 0.5 for that. I wasn't already totally like. This team didn't jump off the page to me too much. I think there's just a lot of mons that like to be on different teams, but they've all been put together. I guess I should say a lot of like cool, good pieces that like to be on the same team. I think this team doesn't have a star player. I think it's got one King Gambit that's kind of a star, but I think this team might struggle to have a bit of a star player. It's going to have to work really hard on a week-to-week basis based on the BST stat total. So utility and support options. So Screamtail again, like I've said, I think that thing is disabled. Disable Encore. Be very, very careful with how you play. If you're playing a more of a setup heavy game or a more balance heavy game, be very, very cautious of what Screamtail can do to you. And I think in terms of it's got Perish, got its own Politoed, and Screamtail, and I think this team has enough utility to get by, but I'm still going to give it about a 0.7 because it's not really disruptive utility. It's more just like overall general utility. Screamtail is really the only one, and the rest of the mons have to kind of work hard or work a little bit outside of their norms to be Thunderwave. Like for example, King Gambit gets Thunderwave. That's random, right? But but still, Thunderous doesn't really ever really want to be pressing Thunderwave, but it can. And Gothitelle obviously gets it. So. Yeah, just overall, it's okay. I'll give it a 0.7 in terms of that. And then terrain and control, terrain and weather control. So it gets dual weather. They clash with each other, but I mean you get total control there. And then there's no terrain on this team. So I mean it has mons that get terrain, but I mean it's not really. It's sort of negligible. So I'm gonna go ahead and give them a 0.9 just because they have the rain, and this team overall comes out to a 7.6. So for this next team, we have the excuse me, the Munching Munchlax. Coach is Cisco Muiti. So if we take a look at our ratings or our rubric, if we look at the Firewater Grass Core, so it has the regular Arcanine, the Palafin, and the Sinistra. Awesome, excellent Firewater Grass Core. This was I guess the old balance from the earlier regulations of VGC, which is cool. So we'll get a point for that. And then you have for the Fairy Dragon Steel Core. Let's see. So they have Dragalge, Enamorus, and Skarmory. Okay, so that passes. Skarmory is a Steel type as well, so that'll give it a full point. In terms of speed control, this team does like its Trick Room. It does have Tailwind, but this team is much more Trick Room heavy. As you can tell, this team isn't the speed tiers. So if we take a look at the speed tiers here, the speed tiers are much more on the lower end and to the middle. But yeah, definitely this team likes to go slowly. Ursaluna's a big threat. So yeah, I think in terms of speed control, I'm going to give this team, because it has really solid ways of setting up Trick Room, and the only knock is just, I guess you could say, is because it doesn't have a lot of Tailwind, but this team doesn't necessarily need Tailwind. This is kind of a hard Trick Room team. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'll give it a 1 because it knows what it is, it knows what it wants to do, it knows what it does. So I'll give it a pass. It has the speed control it needs in order to play the way it wants to play. In terms of type diversity, I think this team actually doesn't have much overlap. It has a normal overlap, it has a psychic overlap. But there's not too much in else besides that, actually. Yeah, it's actually a pretty... Oh, no, there's a flying overlap as well. So I'm going to give it... I think I'm going to give it a 0.7 for this. I just think that the type overlap might be a little too much to overcome. Reuniclus is a good attacker in Trick Room, but not great. Enamorus as well. I think Enamorus has great stats also, but I think it can also sometimes... I guess it's not that underwhelming. It's got a good special attack. So yeah, I think in terms of type diversity, I'll give it a 0.7. I'm just not a fan of some of the type. I'm not a fan of that there's, Enamorus and Skarmory have the same type overlap. Because your Fairy and your Steel types are both weak to the same thing, which is kind of odd. So yeah, type diversity is kind of odd, and that kind of leads into our defensive chart. It leans more on the balance side with the cores being filled out, and Arcanine and Sinistra are just two very very bulky mods, and Palafin likes to switch in and out. So this team's gonna be very very switch heavy. So I think this team does have the tools to be a defensive unit in terms of that. So I'm gonna give it a 1 for that as well. In terms of offensive coverage, I think this team is going to struggle a bit to exert a little bit of offensive pressure. It needs a little bit of time to get going. So I think in terms of its immediate offensive pressure, it might have some problems. And Palafin is a mon that needs to switch in and out. It's always very, very tricky to make. And I think in this format where the format's so fast, it's probably going to be a sore point for the team. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to give it a 0.5 for that. And for the next part, obvious synergies. I think the obvious synergies here are there. In terms of Indeedee plus Trick Room, Sinistra. Sinistra is also a good redirection mon, and I see the switching with the Arcanine and Palafin. I think this team's going to struggle because it's like if you throw for example Palafin and Dragalge out there together, or I don't know, Skarmory and Palafin together. It's like that can be a very passive lead since it doesn't exert a lot of pressure, because I think the highs on this team are very high in terms of stat distribution with attack, because I think this Ursaluna can hit pretty hard, so can Palafin, but outside of that, there's not too high. And then also to the special attackers, there's three solid ones. 121 is really solid for that Sinistra. But outside of that, I think was probably more of a question for offensive synergy, but in terms of just obvious synergies, I think this team's going to struggle to kind of just lead and play. I think it's going to be a very meticulous team, so I'm also going to give it a half point for that. And then in terms of BSTs, it's got a pretty good BST. It's actually got pretty excellent for this format. I think it's mostly driven by a lot of these large stat mons like Enamorus and Palafin, and so I think it could be a little bit deceiving because I think Palafin takes some time to get going, and their Linoones pretty heavy in terms of stat totals. So, yeah, but I think overall, I think I'm going to give it a 0.8 for that. I think that the stat totals, while it might look good on paper, I think it can be a little bit deceiving just based off of the way that some of these mons function. Reuniclus is also one of those, like, another decently BST'd mons, but like it does struggle a lot of times just based off of its poor defensive stats. So, and then in terms of utility, you have the Arcanine, which is great. Will-O-Wisp, Rage Powder, Follow Me with Indeedee. I think this team is going to struggle a little bit with utility in terms of being able to be, wanting to set things up and get going. Yeah, I think this team's going to struggle a little bit with some of the tools that it has. I mean, again, it has Redirection and it has Follow Me, which is really nice with the Rage Powder. And it has the Fake Out with the Scrafty, but the Fake Out can be a little anti-synergistic with Indeedee. And then in terms of terrain and weather control, it's got the Indeedee. So that's a big plus for it in terms of terrain control. Probably the first team we've mentioned so far that has terrain control. But in terms of weather control, it's obviously here on Mons that have it, but I just don't think this team really wants to play in the weather. So I'm going to go ahead and give it probably give it a 0.6 for that. I think Indeedee's enough to kind of get you there to say enough. So I would say that this team overall, what does that add up to? This adds up to 7.6 actually. Okay, so the overall score for this team will be 7.6. Yeah, I think that this team is going to be a very hard trick room team. It's going to want to get into position and start playing that way. I think it's going to have to really fight to get into position. And when teams have to really fight to get into position, they can be susceptible to a lot of counterplay. So yeah, gonna be interesting to see how Cisco navigates it. But yeah, pretty interesting to see a hard trick room. We'll see how that goes for them.